Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals, it's good to be here today. There are a lot of people who are not here, who was here the last time I was here, and many of them are found in Gaza, where the Israelis conducted an airstrike and killed dozens and dozens and dozens of people, with more than half of them being women and children. But I'm not going to go into that this evening because it would take all of the time and probably sap my energy. So I'm going to talk about the importance and significance of voting. This is the year of politics. Every year there's something political going on, but whenever there is a presidential race on the horizon, that is the crowning year event in politics. This is one of those years. So I want to touch on the significance of voting and related issues. As Black people, we know if we just watched television and couldn't read, but if we did read, including the newspaper, and watch the news, we saw during the 60s the horrible things done to Black people who were simply trying to vote. Water hoses that firefighters used to put fires out in big buildings were turned on our people, whether they were old men, old women, teenagers, and younger. Sometimes people would be sent rolling down the street. The jet of water was so strong. Tear gas was used. Dogs, police dogs, were set up on our children, trying to get the simple things that a person in a society that is supposed to be civilized would take for granted. You couldn't eat at a lunch counter. You certainly couldn't live in a neighborhood if there were white people there. You couldn't get a decent job, and Lord help you if you tried to vote. There were times that the registrar would tell people, you can't register because we have to give you a test. How many bubbles are there in a bar of soap? How many windows are on the northeast corner of the courthouse? Things like that. To help ignorant white people, and by that I meant simply those without knowledge, without education, who couldn't read. But the registrars and the powers that be wanted them to be able to vote. They had what they called a grandfather clause, and this is where that clause developed. If a relative of yours voted in an election however many years ago that they say, that automatically entitled you to vote without even registering. That person who was white made it possible by registering for you to be registered. Those of us who would appear in person could not register, therefore could not vote. Sometimes if you registered, your registration was torn up, votes were thrown out, there was corruption everywhere. When your enemy chooses something that puts him in fear, he automatically signals to you that this has power. Voting is something that these racists, not just in the South, not just during the civil rights explosive era of the 60s, but always, they want to do everything they can, put every roadblock in our path so that we cannot register or cannot vote. They change polling places. That's where you actually go to vote without giving adequate notification. These kinds of things still go on today. It's not the land of the free. When Francis Scott Key wrote those words, the land of the free and the home of the brave, when it came time to apply to Black people, it was the land of the tree, the lynchings, and the home of the slave. And Francis Scott Key himself was a slaveholder, as was Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, George Washington. In fact, George Washington, the first president of this country, had so many slaves that when the Civil War broke out, the racist slaveholders in the South, the secessionists, the rebels, took George Washington as their patron saint because he himself had so many slaves. These are the kind of things that those white people who talk about critical race theory, they don't even know what those initials stand for. They mean they don't want the truth about their history told. Whatever your enemy fears is what is able to do the most damage to him and be of greatest help to you. Well, in Omaha, there may be some problems, as there will be anywhere when you have a large-scale system that's being administered. But I have not had anybody contact me to say that in Douglas County they were aware of any inappropriate conduct by the election commissioner, those who worked in that office, or anybody associated with the system. The biggest problem we had was when the legislature, trying to put a roadblock in the path of as many black people and poor white people as they could, required what they call photo ID. I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but I'm just trying to point out and make as clear as I can that voting is a powerful, not just a tool. A tool is used to do meaningful work, things that help. It's a powerful tool and also a weapon. A weapon is used against your enemy, somebody who's trying to hurt you. So whether you look at voting as a tool for constructing a better life by putting people in office of your choice who will do the right thing to the extent that they can, or a weapon that might put as many roadblocks in the path of enemies who are trying to get those positions of power. By the way, I'm running for re-election to the legislature. Some people have raised an issue about my age. Currently, I'm 86 years old. My birthday, July 10th, will make me 87. That will put me 10 years beyond what the Bible says is the number of a man's years. The numbers of a man's years are 70. A score is 20 years. 3 times 20 is 60, plus 10 is 70. So I'm 10 years over that limit already. This birthday that I'll have in July will make me 87. Do I look it? Some of you said I look like I'm 103. Well, if I look like 103 and I'm still here and can drop down and do 25 or 30 push-ups whenever anybody would catch me on the spur of the moment, well, I'm not too feeble. And I believe that my mind is clear. How many of you can do this? Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. For those who may not know, that's the alphabet backwards. You know, if I could say the alphabet backwards, which comprises only 26 letters, I can certainly count from 100 to 1. And in the legislature, what more do I need than that? I can quote long poems. I can sing songs, not well. In fact, I'm called the burglar of music because I break into song. Does this seem to be a lighthearted approach? It may be, but when you're trying to communicate with people, that means you, to the extent possible, are trying to put into their mind what you have in your mind. We use speech, gestures, facial expressions, meaningful pauses, explanations to try, to the extent possible, to show the person or persons we're trying to communicate with what is actually in our mind. There are people, as I was saying before I so rudely interrupted myself, who risk not only having the fire hoses and the dogs set upon them, but being thrown in jail, to be beaten. Fannie Lou Hamer was beaten so badly that she had to go to the hospital. For what? And this was a woman trying to vote in the land of the tree and the home of the slave, trying to the extent that she could, through voting and legitimate means, to make it, in fact, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Tuesday, I went to a memorial for Carol Woods Harris. I don't go to funerals. Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. Memorials, on the other hand, are designed to commemorate what a person has done, what makes them meaningful, and those kind of things. It does not have to do with death, although death is the occasion that brings people together for it. I'm going to read an excerpt from an article that appeared in Saturday's World Herald. Now, black people, before I came along, could not get on the school board, the city council, or the county board. Those elections are what are known as at large. Everybody would vote. Well, black people don't have enough votes in Omaha to put somebody on the school board or the city council. Certainly not enough to put somebody on the county board when our relatively few votes and a much greater number of white people's votes. Carol Woods Harris was what I call not only Carol Woods Harris, but Brenda Council, the county board member. If he's watching, I hope he thinks that I couldn't recall his name, but before I get through, I'm going to tell you who I mean. The headline in this article from Saturday, Carol Woods Harris, 84. Service set for pioneer in business and politics. Carol Woods Harris, a pioneering community and political leader who helped pave the way to leadership for younger generations of black people and women, will be celebrated at an Omaha service Tuesday. Woods Harris was the first black person elected to the Douglas County Board and served 3 terms. She also was elected to the Nebraska State Board of Education. Woods Harris died in April in North Carolina, where she had gone to live near family after her second retirement in Omaha. She was 84. The Omaha Memorial Service will be at 11 a.m. Tuesday at Clare Memorial United Methodist Church, 5544 Ames Avenue. Woods Harris is remembered in Omaha for not only being a pioneer as a black woman in politics, but also as a mentor to others. She was always open to mentorship, said Douglas County Board member Chris Rogers, who was elected to Woods Harris's former District 3 seat in 2004. Woods Harris, a Democrat, won election to the Douglas County Board in 1992, the first year of elections for the board by district, and that was a bill that I fought tooth and nail for in the legislature. People often ask me, what'd you do while you were in the legislature? I got district elections for the county board, for the city council, for the school board, and a lot of people in Omaha and Nebraska don't read the newspapers. These things were written about in national publications because they knew that Nebraska is if you're being nice, an ultra-conservative, narrow-minded state, and there are very few black people. to have one black person in a legislature of 49, one against 48, and could get legislation such as this, district elections for the city governing board, the county governing board, and the county would be the Douglas County Board, and the school board. We had no way to consistently get anybody in those positions. That's just one of the areas where I operated. And it's why I consider all of the black people who landed in those positions to be my political godchildren. I am their political godfather, whether they like it or not. See, we don't get to choose our parents. Parents don't get to choose their children, but they get to choose whether they're going to keep them alive or drown them in a bucket of water. Anyway, Woods Harris, the Democrat, won election to the Douglas County Board in 1992, the first year of elections for the board by district. She won re-election twice. She represented District 3, which includes Northeast Omaha, for 12 years, including 2 stints as board chair and 2 stints as vice chair. She was active in other areas as well, including as a founding member of the Women's Fund of Omaha, a board member of the United Methodist Community Centers, vice president of the National Council of Negro Women, president of the Leadership Omaha Alumni Association for Legislative Advocates for the Urban League of Nebraska. Rogers once described her as a velvet hammer. That is one of the most dynamic descriptions I've ever heard in my life. Chris Rogers said this. I wouldn't get his credit while he's alive. He probably doesn't watch this, even if he knows how to get it on his gadget. Rogers once described her as a, quote, velvet hammer, unquote, for her ability to be effective without rancor. Quote, I never saw her get loud, unquote, he said this week. Quote, I never saw her expression exchange like she was mad or frustrated or anything. But before you knew it, velvetly, it would be done. End of the quote. Woods Harris won election to the Nebraska State Board of Education in 2004. She retired from politics in 2008 and moved to Tega Cay, South Carolina. That shows what voting can do. A person of that ability was put in a position to make use of it. And the thing about black representatives, and it may not be the case in every instance, will look not just at the constituency that put them in office. What I tell people, I'm not going to go into that. Do you all realize that the Constitution of the United States, the land of the free and the home of the brave, makes 4 references to slavery, the acknowledgement that at the time this country was founded, slavery was in full flower? I told you that Francis Scott Key wrote the words to what became the national anthem. There was a battle in Louisiana, Fort McHenry, and it was going roughly. They were fighting the British. And then when daylight came, the flag was there, so he said, oh, say can you see, by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars, through the perilous night, or however it goes. I'm not too good at it. But anyway, he wrote the words, but he was not a lyricist. He was not musically inclined. So guess where the melody that is almost unsingable came from? There was a Greek god named Anacreon. He was the god of liquor, wine, and carousing. The English people composed this song to Anacreon in heaven. And here is the melody of that song rendered in part by the burglar of music who breaks into song. Da 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 da. That melody came from the British drinking song to Anacreon in heaven. So a slaveholder wrote the lyrics, the melody from an English drinking song, and it gives you an idea of the peasant-like origins of the United States. And for those white people who know a little of the history, you can see why they don't want it taught in the public schools. They say that it makes little white children feel guilty. Well, if the truth makes them feel guilty, something is wrong with the way you put the truth. Because the Bible says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. But they don't believe the Bible like everything else. They use it when it's convenient, but then they use it as a weapon. Let me get into these bits from the Constitution. First, I'm going to read the preamble. That is a brief statement that precedes the contents of a document, and it lays out a description of what the document is going to be about. A summary, in a way, if you will. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, that means descendants, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, here is something about grammar. In order to establish a more perfect, the word perfect means without flaw, no defect. Perfect is the word used to describe that which cannot be improved. But the American forefathers, as they call them, were not too hot on grammar, just like they were not too hot on morality. So they said to form a more perfect union. Something cannot be more perfect. Either it's perfect or it's imperfect. Once it's perfect, it's without flaw. Look it up in your dictionary. Anyway, white people say my problem is that I read and I understand words and I can string words together into complete sentences. But they're telling the truth. But I don't use language as a weapon to hurt people who should not be hurt. I use language to soothe the brokenhearted, and my constituency comprises the 3 L's: the least, the last, and the lost. I read the Bible 8 times from cover to cover when I was a student in high school. And although I think there's a lot of nonsense in it, I think there are contradictions in it. There is rape, murder, incest, lying, cheating, stealing, genocide. All of those things are in the Bible. So when these people who want to take certain literature off the shelves in the libraries, not just in schools, but public libraries, the first book that ought to go is the Bible. It's full of nonsense. And As the Gershwin brothers, one wrote it and the other put the music to it, it ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, they ain't necessarily so. But anyway, I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. When there were 2 children on the earth and their parents, a total of 4 people, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. Cain killed his brother Abel. God's voice was walking in the garden. They lived in the Garden of Eden, not the Garden of Apartments, as far as I know. It's not written in the Bible that way. He said, "Where's your brother?" And I'm paraphrasing. Cain got a look of a snarl on his face, and he said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" God didn't answer. Cain didn't answer. But during those high school days, childlike mind, I gave an answer. In the Bible it said, of one blood, God made all nations of mankind. So that meant there's a common ancestry for all human beings. There's a guy named John Donne, an English poet, who talked about various things, and in one of his poems he said something to the effect, "No man is an island entire unto itself. Each is a part of the main." He talked about how, and the main was England. The main meant the entire country. Each is a part of that. And if a clod fell off, a piece of it washed away, then the main was lessened, made less by the loss of that clod. And after dealing with that, he said, "Every man's death diminishes me because I am a part of humankind. Therefore, seek not to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." In those days when somebody crowed, the bell would ring and you knew another one had bit the dust. So, when I was sworn in as a member of the legislature, and even before then, I wouldn't swear. And when I use the term swear now, I'm not talking about foul language, obscene language, bad words. It's an oath. And in the court, or wherever you take an oath in a legal setting, it doesn't mean that by you saying, "I swear to tell the truth and whole truth, nothing but the truth," in your mind you're saying, "I swear to tell the truth and the whole truth and everything but the truth." It simply establishes a point in time where you created a legal liability on yourself if what you say is not true. If you knowingly speak an untruth under oath, it's known as perjury. Perjury does not refer to a mere untruth. It is an untruth knowingly and intentionally spoken when you are under oath. You had promised, knowing that there's a penalty if you lie. You promised to tell the truth. So when I put my hand up like we all do, I don't mind doing that. And the Constitution of the state gives the words that are given to somebody who's going to become a state officer, whether it's a member of the legislature, a member of the court, or a state office like the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, and right on down the line. The substance of the oath is that you'll do the job to the best of your ability. And then there are other words that you use as fillers. Well, because in the early days of this country, there were people whose religion, and they wouldn't swear based on what the Bible itself said. I'm paraphrasing now. "Swear not by God, for that is his throne. Swear not by Jerusalem, for that is his footstool. Swear not by thy head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Swear not at all. Let your yea be yea, your nay be nay. Anything more or other than this comes of evil. So, when the country that you all call the United States of America came into being, they did administer oaths. But because there were certain religious people who took their religion seriously enough, maybe not enough to avoid committing adultery, fornication, and things like that, but they took it seriously enough to do the easy things like not swearing, they put in parentheses, or affirm. And that word affirm spared you from taking an oath, swearing. You took the oath, but you did not swear. Yours was an affirmation, but it carried the same legal consequences. If in that situation, which otherwise would require the taking of an oath, you gave an affirmation and you knowingly, intentionally lied at the time you took it, then there can be legal consequences. If you are a member of the legislature or one of these other offices and you lie, then you're not going to go to prison for simply telling that lie. All politicians are presumed to be liars. But when I gave my affirmation, I meant it, and I did it without what is called reservation. That means you say certain words, but you leave unspoken the notion in your mind that I'm not going to do all of that. I'll go this far and no farther. When you hold back on it, that's a legal reservation, mental reservation. My intent, because I promised people when I first ran for the office, I was going to do the best I could to carry out the duties of that office, which meant to help everybody that I could who needed help, regardless of race, creed, color, religion, sexual orientation. Anything born of a man and woman is a human being. And since of one blood, God made all the nations of the worlds of men, then everybody born is my brother and my sister. And whereas Cain did not give an answer when God said, "Where's thy brother?" Cain answered with a question, "Am I my brother's keeper?" So I answered it. To the extent possible, I am my brother and my sister's keeper. And to the extent that I could, I kept that affirmation. I have people calling me to this day, lamenting the fact that I'm not in the legislature. White people who say, and I've got letters to this effect, I called my senator, he or she would not even take my call. I wrote, I got no response. I contacted you, and you got something done. That was not to make me a hero. It simply made me true to myself. I don't do things to impress anybody. I have an internal governor. You all call it a conscience. I call it what I call it. And that's between me and me. Now, that one inside of me is I let people know I have one true friend, and I give him a male gender because I'm male. He is deep down inside of me. He knows me. He knows everything I do. He sees everything I do. He knows everything I say. Maybe I can fool all of the people. Lincoln said you can fool all of the people some of the time. You can fool some people all of the time, but you can't fool all people all of the time. Well, Trump has fooled his people all of the time and continues to do so. But nevertheless, this one inside of me will not let me rest if I have not done what I have voluntarily obliged myself to do. But when that one inside of me says, "Well done," that's when I can lay my head on the pillow at night and sleep the sleep of the just. And that is how I live. That's how I direct my life. And I don't tell anybody they have to do as I do, because they have their internal, whatever they call it, as I have mine. But I never give up. I trust my own judgment. I will never quit. And whereas to try to get somewhat poetic, I may fly in the upper regions of the air and soar like an eagle, but I never lose the purposeful swoop of the falcon. And that's the way I operate. So it doesn't make any difference to me whether people approve of what I do, whether they disapprove, whether they like me, whether they dislike me. It doesn't hurt me. I have one that I must please, and I know right from wrong. I cannot do like some people and fool myself. At any rate, this Constitution that I started talking about makes 4 direct mentions and references to slavery. But you should start with the Declaration of Independence, because it was put together prior to the Constitution. This Declaration of Independence meant that these colonists were going to break away from England. They were going to commit treason against their king, King George. And it starts, we the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, do establish and ordain this Constitution. That's where they end the Constitution. But the Declaration of Independence is different. And it talks about why these colonists are going to break away from the king. And I'm not going to go through all of that. But it starts by saying, we hold these truths. These are truths to be self-evident. That means when you say it, it defines itself. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That means you can't give them up yourself even if you want to, because as a human being, there are certain things that attach to you, and you cannot do away with them even if you try. Even if you conduct yourself in a certain way, you still remain a human being. Endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To procure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Notice they say men, not women. And that they derive their force, the government, from the consent of the governed. Anybody who's governed has a right to either consent or dissent when a certain policy is in place. But not to take up arms, that becomes revolution. But black people were not included in that we the people. We were never included when it came to having all of the rights that goes along with something like that. But then this Constitution of this country that was supposed to be a beacon of light to everybody else had to acknowledge that they had enslaved people. They treated us like cows, pigs, and chickens. They raped black women, raped little girls. Thomas Jefferson, who did a lot of drafting of documents, had a 14-year-old girl named Sally Hemings that he traveled to France with and committed sexual acts and produced children on this child, Thomas Jefferson. And they sold us like cows, pigs, and chickens. I'm going to read the preamble, as I said. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do our for the United States of America. And Thomas Jefferson, in one of those rare instances of telling the truth, discussing slavery, he said, I tremble for my country when I remember that God is just, but he didn't tremble enough to free his slaves. And then I add this, Thomas Jefferson had a few favorite black women. And when Mrs. Jefferson, no woman likes the man who's supposed to be her husband or her man to be messing around with other women. She said, Thomas, I want to talk to you. He said, what do you want to talk to me about, Mrs. Jefferson? She said, Thomas, you leave those black women alone. He said, Mrs. Jefferson, I'll leave you alone first. And he often left her alone to go down into the slave huts and commit sexual acts on those black women. That's the history that the people who are white today and know their history don't want taught in the schools. Because the history of this country is so ugly, so anti-human and righteousness that those in power don't want it to be taught. So what am I getting at? A number of things. But I want to show where the Constitution acknowledged the slavery. In Article 1, Section 2, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, meaning population, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, white people, 3/5 of all other persons. Those were the slaves. That's what they mean by the 3/5 of a man. 3/5 of the slaves would give the southern slaveholders additional power in the federal government, even though those 3/5 have no rights whatsoever, are not even treated as human beings. Article 1, Section 9, to protect the slave trade. The migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808. They protected the slave trade while talking about creating a free society for 20 years. Congress could not amend the Constitution to prohibit slavery during that time. Article 4, Section 2. No person held to the service of labor in one state, meaning a slave, they won't put the word slave, held to service or labor in one state under the laws of that state, escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be discharged from such service or labor. In other words, whatever is said by the law in that state, if the slave gets there, that law will not remove his status as a slave, but he shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such services or labor may be due. It means that a slave who had the ingenuity and wherewithal to escape to what they call a free slave would be caught and had to be returned to slavery in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Article 5, when the Constitution is discussed in terms of being amended. No amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of this article, and those dealt with slavery. The slave trade was protected for 20 years, and if a slave escaped, that person had to be, if it was captured, had to be returned to slavery. Now my time is just about up. So I'm going to indicate that when people fear the vote, fear those who vote, it lets you know what is the strongest weapon you have at your disposal to fight your enemy. Black people, I'm talking to you especially. Register and vote. Vote for the person who you feel is going to do the job that is required, meaning give his or her best thought, study, and ability to make sure that all people, to the extent one person can do it, will enjoy the fruits of liberty, justice, and equality. This subject is so vast. College courses that run for years are offered. I had to do it in an hour, and I couldn't do it all. And maybe I didn't even do it well. But I'm not going to shortchange myself. I did what I could with what I had to work with in the time allotted. And if I get back in that legislature, there's going to be a change. And I've had people call me from other parts of the state who said if they could vote for me, they would, but they know they can't. And one of these times I'm going to discuss how it was that I got the things done in the legislature that I did, such as retaining the one electoral vote that Nebraska has. And when I kept it and Biden won, national media said that that one vote could deliver the presidency to Joe Biden if he did not win Pennsylvania, and it was put there by the only black member of the Nebraska legislature. You all don't know what you have, do you? And some of you who know what you have don't like it, do you? Well, I got to be me. What else could I be but what I am? And take it or leave it, like it or love it. What you see is what you get. And as the canary said, when he found out that the door to the cage was open, I'm out of here.
You've been watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to leave suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This is an EWC Communications production.